Okay, I'm live. Yeah, I am alive. Okay, good morning. Welcome on another Saturday edition of the Root Cause Radio Solution Show. This is recorded. I'm listening to myself speak right now. Okay, let's hopefully I'm actually on live on Facebook. Once again, another Saturday where it's another challenge getting this live Facebook thing working. Unbelievable. You got to have a engineering degree. Yeah, so I want to pick up a little bit from last week. Again, regarding this coronavirus and autoimmunity and stuff, there's been a lot of questions and so much confusion, I think, regarding autoimmunity, and how people see it, understand it, and the concerns they have, which they should be concerned, all right, but more being informed and taking action. Um, Let me just begin by saying, the reason I'm a few minutes late, I was just finishing talking with someone and who has been suffering with severe anxiety and body pains for an enormous amount of time of her life, right? And trying all types of doctors with very little help. And I get, people get so concerned about making dietary change and stuff and thinking things are heavy and it's a work. It's just because people just don't really understand. That's the point. They don't really understand the connections between things like food and their anxiety or their pains, as an example. They don't really understand if they have autoimmunity, they don't really understand it. And so my job really is to help inform and educate people. So this job is to actually empower people, with the information, so we can take action, right? Autoimmunity, having autoimmune diagnosis is not a death sentence in any which way, shape, or form, right? It's something we have to learn how to work with and regulate. But but you're not being taught that in the medical model, because the medical model basically says we don't know why this is happening, and we don't know. We're not going to cure it, so we're just going to put it into submission, right? They're not putting it into remission. They're putting it into submission, right? What they're doing, as I said, they're giving you immune suppressing drugs, right? And again, in the short term, may be appropriate, right? If you have rheumatoid arthritis and it's aggressively destroying your joints, right? Probably the medication in the short term can mitigate the damage, right? But it's not addressing the fundamentals, the root causes, plural, of why you have the rheumatoid arthritis or any autoimmune disease, right? So only in the functional model is anybody capable of looking and discovering, what are truly the root causes that are driving these things. Ultimately, the person who has the condition has to take action, right? I can just interpret lab tests, I can guide people through certain things, but the person who has it has to take action, right? And the problem I'm always seeing is that people, again, there's resistance. That people put in obstacles all the time, okay? But part of the reason is because they don't really fundamentally understand the whole process. And so that's why we do things like these live Facebook shows, we're doing webinars, we produce content as much as possible, because we need for people to be informed, to realize that this approach really is the answer. It really is the answer. In the long term, it's the answer. But this, on another quick, not a sidebar, but it's interesting because as just this morning, I mean, maybe about an hour ago, the news happened to be on, and I actually was watching something about a young child in Long Island, New York, who I think she was 13, or she is 13. I shouldn't say what. She's 13 years old, and she got the coronavirus back this past March, and she had mild symptoms and got over it. 5 months later, she has now developed, they're calling it a blood vessel syndrome. Okay, they're also referring to it as a condition called POTS, P-O-T-S, okay, which is a partial hypo underactive orthostatic pressure, meaning is that when you stand up, right, you want to pass out. Okay, so you can't get oxygen to your blood effectively. It's a pretty bad scenario, right? It's basically, I mean, your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system is just basically dysregulated. So it is a blood vessel disease, but it's also a central nervous system or a brain problem, okay, which is triggered post-COVID, triggered, right? Then the connections I've been trying to make with everybody, right, is that why would it happen so many months later? Why do we see they call them these long haulers? So as I said many times over, the degree of the severity of the symptoms when you're infected with the coronavirus does not equate to the immunological response post-COVID. I hope I'm making that clear. Meaning, okay, these post-COVID long haulers, whether it be something like POTS, blood vessel diseases, chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety, chronic coughs, skin conditions, doesn't matter, are all immune driven. So the virus was not the actual, how do I say it, direct cause of that. What the virus does is it's, when you're infected with the virus, is that your immune system is reacting to the virus, right? Hopefully in an appropriate way, but it's when the immune system being turned on by the virus, and that immune system is not functioning properly, it's in a sense it's dysregulated, we get an, let's just call it an amplified immune reaction. Then the immune system is not calming down appropriately. So it's the amplification of that immune system reaction, which means the amplification of inflammation in the body that is then the precipitus of these conditions. And so when we get into the discussion of autoimmunity, why we're seeing an explosion of autoimmunity is because so many people, okay, very common that we have what it calls the immune system produces antibodies, and those antibodies may tag self tissues, whether it's your thyroid, whether it's your blood vessels, whether it's your liver, whether it's your the mitochondria of your cells, whether it's parts of your brain. I mean, every tissue in your body is made up of proteins. It means every tissue in your body potentially can develop an autoimmunity. Now we're going to get more into this, right? So if you haven't known by now, right, is this coming Thursday, was it August 26th at 7 p.m., right? We're going to be holding our monthly free webinar, right? So it's about an hour-long webinar about the emerging autoimmune crisis that we're seeing here, right? And we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into understanding more about antibodies and the different type of antibodies and the things that trigger them, and the common things that we look for to understand not how and why the immune system is in balance, and talk about some strategies that kind of get you back on track a little bit. So join us on Thursday at 7 p.m. August 26th. We'll take a deeper dive into this. Where do you want to go from here?
Well, you wanted to talk about what is an antibody.
Yeah, okay, we're going to take what is an antibody. Again, we'll talk a little bit more in depth with that, but I keep saying again because I feel like I'm saying this over and over again, but the immune system is our defense system. It's there to protect us against things that are foreign, such as a coronavirus. So it should be identifying the coronavirus. But in order to identify the coronavirus, it's just like the coronavirus just comes in and immediately your immune system says, that's wrong. No, it needs to be told it. So you have certain types of immune cells that are circulating, right? And their job is to identify something that looks foreign and kind of surround it, right? And then they call for help. They call for recruitment, right? And these are your helper cells. And certain types of helper cells, their job is to produce antibodies, right? And those antibodies, when they're produced, are being produced specifically for the protein of that invading bug. Let's call it a virus. Right? Remember, the immune system only reacts to proteins. So with the coronavirus, or any virus for that matter, what it's reacting to, right, is the spike protein, which is a protein. Okay, so if it comes in, your initial immune system, called your innate immune system, should see that and go after it and try to surround it. It can try to kill it a little bit, but it really, its job is just to kind of surround it, and it needs to call for help.
So an antibody is like a tag.
So The helper cells, the specific helper cells that make antibodies, yeah, it's like a tag or a bullseye. Okay, it tags, when they're made, it tags the virus or tags the protein, the virus, and it kind of neutralizes that. But that tag, that bullseye, that antibody then signals other immune cells. They see that antibody, and that tells these other immune cells that that is foreign, and these are attacking immune cells, killer cells, natural killer cells, cytotoxic cells. You know, they do what they sound like, right? They come in where that antibody is, and they begin to destroy that virus or that bacteria. Okay, that's what antibodies do. Okay. Um, See, I'm kind of, see other things too, like that same system that also does other things. Like when you think about something like allergies, pollen as an example, right? When we have an immune system response to pollen, right? Your immune system, these initial immune cells can't surround pollen. It's just too big, right? So you can only surround small things like viruses and bacteria, right? You can't surround the pollen, and you can't surround something like a parasite. They're too big, right? And that's why other parts of the immune system produce mucus, because the mucus then, and the immune cells and mucus kind of push it out of the body. That's what you're discharging, right? So there's all kinds of backup mechanisms, right? But the point is that these antibodies that are produced by the immune system are tagging something that's foreign. So the question would be, why would the immune system make these antibodies and then tag your own tissue, like your thyroid gland? That's the whole thing. That's what autoimmunity is. And again, and I keep saying again, but in the medical model, what they say to you is that we don't know why. There is no known cause for this. This is why typically, and let's just use thyroid as an example. Typically, if you go and you get diagnosed with an underactive thyroid, your blood test shows that your TSH is elevated, for example, and they say your thyroid is too slow. They typically don't run the antibodies, right? They don't run it, and the reason why they don't run it is because it does not change the strategy in the medical model. The medical model doesn't care really if you have the antibodies or not. They don't care if it's autoimmune or not because it doesn't change the strategy. It's useless information to them. All they're going to do is give you replacement hormones. The point is you might need the replacement hormones, but if you're not really addressing the autoimmune component, it's going to get worse. And that is one of the dire consequences and the mismanagement of this, especially like with thyroid, because what I always try to explain is that if you have an underactive thyroid, if you have hypothyroidism, and you identify the positive antibodies there, the cause of the underactive thyroid is the autoimmunity. The cause of the underactive thyroid is that your immune system is, like, for lack of a better word, is attacking the thyroid. Is attacking self tissue. So it's like when we in my world, when we see that, right? I always say to people that it no longer becomes a thyroid game. It now becomes an immune game in all things immunological, right? And that's why, what are the many factors that can turn on and turn off this immune system that could turn on more aggressively attack against your thyroid? What we want to do is we want to turn it off, and we want to put it into remission. So at the end of the day, really, it's about autoimmune management. It's an immune management game, and you don't need to fear this. You just need to understand it, run the right tests, and get the right strategies so you can put this into remission so it doesn't wreck your life, right? And we'll go on. That's the whole idea, right? So again, we're going to go deeper into this on Thursday at 7 p.m., August 26th. I want you to join me for that. What other questions do we have?
I think on this topic, I think, unless you want to go into toxicity, unless you want to go
No, I don't want to go too much into things. That's, I just want to go back and maybe just, wanted to get off the whole vaccine thing she did last week. I wanted to put that to rest. But I mean, it is something I still continue to hear. And this is not about the vaccine, but it's just the one point that I want to make. Using this young girl, 13 years old, who is now experiencing this blood vessel syndrome, what they also call POTS disease, 5 months post the coronavirus infection, where her symptoms were very mild, right? So again, it's this is like, I keep hearing people talk about the concerns about the vaccine, right? The concerns about what the side effects of the vaccine are going to be. But again, my point is, what are the side effects of being infected? So again, we come down to the risk versus reward. I know we all have to make our own decisions about this, but the point is we need to be, correctly informed, so that we are making educated decisions. Everybody's uniquely different. Everybody's circumstances are different, right? And I get that, right? And so there's interest. So I get when people are concerned if they have autoimmunity, should they or shouldn't they? Okay, we'll maybe also get into that a little bit more specifically on Thursday. Okay.
But maybe you could ask that right now. Just immune compromise. Again, people get confused.
Okay.
Like I have an autoimmune disease, which doesn't mean I have
So
an actual
so okay,
virus.
yeah, let's just talk about that for a few minutes and then we'll wrap up, which is um, you know, autoimmunity goes through the process goes through different stages or phases, whatever word you want to use, right? Um, Meaning many people will develop if you just start running antibody tests as a routine basis, I would say, the majority of people at some point are going to find an antibody someplace. Okay. Let me just back up again. Why would the immune system put an antibody against self-tissue? Why would it do that? That's the question that should be asked. Why would the immune system put it there? Again, your medical doctors just shrug and say, I don't know, right? But there's a reason, right? Why? So it used to be thought that the immune system was dysregulated. That's what it could say. Well, the point is it's not the immune system is not dysregulating. The immune system is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. But why would it see your thyroid gland, using that as an example, as something foreign? It's seeing your thyroid gland like a virus. It's because something else has attached to your thyroid protein, and some of the thyroid protein looks different to the immune system. That could be a virus, could be a bacteria, could be food proteins, right? Could be metals, could be mercury, right? It could be anything. So when that attaches to a tissue protein, your tissue protein looks foreign to the immune system. So in the initial states, again, these helper cells will start manufacturing antibodies, okay, and tagging the thyroid tissue in this example with an antibody. Now, just because that antibody is there doesn't mean that the other parts of the immune system, those cytotoxic cells and those natural killer cells, see that are going to go after it right away. So that's what we call silent autoimmunity. So the person, one, has the antibodies because it was tested, but the rest of the test, using thyroid again as an example, the TSH, all the hormones look normal, and the person doesn't really have any symptoms of hypothyroid. So they're in a silent stage. But if that's the case and you find it, it's still really important that you inform that person that this is what's happening. And at some point, if you don't manage it properly, it will then move and progress from a silent phase into an active phase. And in the active phase is when you start to see some numbers starting to move. And all of a sudden the TSHs go up and T4s are going down. And then from an active phase, if it's not controlled, it's going to advance into a more aggressive, and we have hyper aggressive destruction going on, phases of it, right? So you can have an antibody against your joints for many, many, many years, and then somewhere along the line, something turns it on, whether it's an infection, whether it's a stress factor, a divorce, an accident, something turns something on, and then off it goes. So you can go from a silent rheumatoid state to an active state to an aggressive destruction state where the tissue is destroying, right? So the earlier you intercede and control these things, the better. Now, again, the world of immunity and autoimmunity gets pretty crazy because of things called cross reactions, which means that your immune system can see different tissues or different proteins similarly, and it can't distinguish one from the other. So let me say one more thing before you ask that question, right? So per example, and this is not my opinion, this is coming out in the literature, is when a person gets an antibody against their thyroid gland, about 90% of the time, the immune system is also putting an antibody against the cerebellum of their brain. It's pretty important to know that, right? So if we're not treating that and getting that under control, right, is that the immune system is going after the thyroid and simultaneously going after the cerebellum of the brain. So we know in this cross-reactive world, for example, if the immune system, there's a cross-reaction between gluten, the protein found in wheat, rye, and barley, and thyroid. I mean, it's just because it looks too similar. So if your immune system sees gluten poorly, negatively, if your immune system reacts to gluten when you eat gluten, and you have antibodies against your thyroid, when you eat the gluten, your immune system is going to go after the gluten, and it's going to turn around, it's going to go after the thyroid. And because you have antibodies triggered from that to the cerebellum, when you eat gluten, your immune system is going to attack your cerebellum, and you're going to start getting cerebellum degeneration. And you'll see it as a condition known as cerebellar ataxia. So people start having all kinds of coordination and balance problems, okay, which is an autoimmune attack against the cerebellum. Okay, what's the question?
So the question still though is simply you had an autoimmune disease.
Mhm.
That's not a suppressed immune system.
Yeah, so since it's trying to make clarification, which is if you, when you have an autoimmune condition, that does not mean that you have a suppressed immune system. People get concerned saying, I don't know, because they hear these words that people maybe need the vaccine or shouldn't get the vaccine or need a booster shot because they have they're immune compromised, right? That's what you see. Get the booster shot for the immune compromised people. There's no association that with autoimmunity and being immune compromised or immune suppressed. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm not making that clear. Let me try to make that clearer. If I'm taking immune suppressing drugs, all the drugs we talked about that you see on these commercials, right? Enbrel, again, for psoriatic arthritis. That's why call your doctor if you get yeast infections, if you get sores, if you get tuberculosis, if you get a chronic cough. Why? Because your immune system is being suppressed and you're more susceptible to being infected. So it would seem if I'm on that drug and I'm suppressing my immune system, I would be pretty vulnerable to a coronavirus, especially an aggressive Delta variant, right? That's the point. That's why these things are so bad, okay? But having an autoimmune condition does not mean your immune system is suppressed. It doesn't mean that, right? If you're yeah, if you have an autoimmune condition though, and you get the virus, if you weren't doing good things already to keep your immune system balanced and regulated, you know, it's really the exaggerated immune system response. That's how I was giving you an example of with this young girl who's 13. Okay, the long haul syndrome was not because of a immune suppression or immune compromise. It was because of an amplification of the immune system. Her immune system was already dysregulated and it couldn't regulate itself back from the initial immune response and come back to a balanced state. It turned on and it went off. Okay. And basically what was happening to this young lady is that the infection promoted an autoimmune response. It triggered the autoimmune response. And that's what the blood vessel syndrome is. Okay. One more thing, I'll let you go. Right in the very beginning of this, remember when they didn't think any kids were being affected by this? Kids, and all of a sudden, like all these little kids, infants, almost not young, like you know, kids 5, 6, 7 years of old, were getting this thing called vasculitis. Like they had all these red marks all over their bodies. I'm not, huh? COVID toes and stuff like that. Like, oh my God, now we say like kids are susceptible and this thing. Well, vasculitis. But what is vasculitis? Right? It's inflammation of the vascular system, but what is it exactly? It's autoimmunity. It's your immune system attacking or going aggressively against and damaging, attacking your blood vessels. Just the plain words, but that's what it is. It's autoimmunity. Okay. All right. So one more time, Thursday, 7 p.m. Join us for the webinar. Yeah, we will not be doing this live Facebook radio show next Saturday. So again, join us Thursday, and we will pick up 2 weeks from today. So look forward to that. I guess, is that going to be after Labor Day? Is it? The end of the official summer already? Yikes. Okay. All right, guys. See you soon. Bye-bye.